Hi, this is Frankie from AA Dental Design, and today we're going to be talking about aesthetic digital wax ups using the inLab 15 and the MCX5. In our laboratory, when cases come in that doctors want wax ups, no matter if it's coming in through CereConnect or if it's conventional impressions, everything is basically processed through the inLab 15. In our laboratory, we also have a printer. With the printer, most of the cases that come CereConnect, we actually print out the models and we prep the models for processing. So that way we can just rescan it and start our wax ups. Once we design them, we export them to our CAM software and we mill it using the MCX5. But with our conventional stuff, we actually have our models. So the doctor sends us his pre-op models. Once he sends us his pre-op models, we actually prep them and scan them with the INEOS X5. Once they're designed, we export it to our CAM software, and we use the Harvest white wax to mill out most of our aesthetic wax up. We really like it. It's a pretty sturdy wax, but yet you can actually carve to it if you want to add your own flavor to it. There's also add-on wax if you want to add some wax to it, or even do cutbacks. And once you do the cutbacks, you can actually add some different colored wax to make things look really pretty. But at the end, this process for our laboratory, it just makes the process a lot faster. As many know, our laboratory is 5, and we can handle a lot of different cases that come in by using the inLab system. For those of you who have come by my laboratory, you kind of see our process. So I was told we have about an hour, so I need to get to designing a case. Like I said, I want to show the process after everything is scanned, after everything is prepped. For me, it's very important for me to just show my process and how I design cases like this. So when we have our case, what we're going to do is we're going to click on bridge restorations. I prefer to do them as a bridge instead of single units. Sometimes if I want to show some really nice embrasures and stuff like that, and I really don't want to work on the case too much, I'll click. I'll use them as single units instead of a bridge. And especially if I'm doing a bridge, my connectors, the connectors that I choose are always intersection. I think that it actually looks nicer when it mills out, and it's a lot easier to handle. At the end of this design phase, I'm just going to show you a couple pictures of different cases that we've done. Whether or not they're single or full bridge. Like I said, it's kind of your preference. Sometimes if it's single, it's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. So when it's just one connected bridge, then it makes life a little bit easier sometimes when you're going to process the case at the end after it's milled. So we'll move on to the next step. Click on model. This is something, if somebody wants to ask me a question about why I do this, you can definitely ask me at the end here. But I'll set my model axis. Again, the way that I set my model axis is a little bit different than most. To me, it solves a couple little issues that come across once you're designing the case. I always tilt my model a little bit instead of just setting it according to the lines that you see there. So I just normally tilt it so I can see all the margins, or at least give an angle where I can see most of the margins on all the different preps. So after I do that, I click on the edit jawline. And then once we get to the next step, there you go, we edit our jawlines. Now I'm setting this up in a way where all these dots are representing the initial arch position for the biojaw function. There are 7 blue dots. The last blue dot at the end of the arch, I set them on the distal of the last molars. The rest of the dots, I set them between 14 and 13, 11 and 12, 8 and 9, 6 and 7, 6 and 5, and 4 and 3. Then the blue numbers go over each prep. Those blue numbers will tell the software where to auto trim. Okay. Now once I'm done, move on to this next stage. So now we take our case. Now that each one has the auto trim, okay, we'll move forward and start choosing our margins. Now, normally when I'm choosing margins for any wax ups that I do, I usually click on manual, and then it just makes my life a little bit easier when I do it that way. So because I'm trying to pick my margin sort of where the tissue and the tooth, well, where I prepped that actual tooth, I'm just going to make a circle. Now, this is kind of important, especially when you're trying to do cases that, let's say you want to virtually seat and maybe print out a model, or and I'll show that in a little bit, you know, what actually could happen. But what happens is that if you cross your margins, then when you try to virtually seat your case, it will actually give you an error. It won't allow you. So then you have to try to find the margin that is overlapping each other. So I'm going to try to do this part as fast as I can. You know, like I said, I only have an hour, and I don't even know how far into this I am right now. But it's always interesting to sit here and talk to a computer. You know, you're just talking and designing and talking, especially on a case like this. You know, I've done a couple of webinars where, you know, you kind of lose track of time. I remember one time I did a webinar where, you know, my wife, well, now me and Allison are married, so I can say that my wife, even though I've considered her my wife for the past 11 years. But moving forward, one day I was doing a webinar and she dropped a pan on the floor. And so I had to, you know, I lost track of where I was at. So sometimes when you're prepping, if you look at this little area over here, you know, it kind of causes these weird sections. But again, because this is just wax that's going to go over these models, I don't really pay too much attention to those sections right there. You know, I'll just keep moving on and continue picking my margins. Like I said, always use manual when you're doing these kind of cases because it will just make your life easier, instead of auto choosing your margins and then going back and fixing it. So, all right. Get that little area there. Once what you'll notice too is when you mill these out in wax and you put it onto the model, you know, again, you just want to try to pick these margins where there's not too many undercuts or anything like that, because, you know, I definitely am not a dentist. I've never prepped an actual you know, patient, but on a model, I'm a stud. All right, so hopefully I finish this quickly so that I just don't start rambling on forever. All right. And hopefully I'm not crossing. Oh, I still got 5 more. All right. So hopefully I'm not overlapping any of my margins, but you know, we'll find out eventually. All right. So just finish these up. Again, if you've never done a webinar, you know, these are always the moments, because there's that process. You can't get around doing a case like this if you don't pick the margins. So after this, I only have 3 more. I turned off my phone, but all I hear is brrr. Now the next 3. go down the home stretch here. I wish there was a magic button that I would just click on and my margins would be picked. Last two. All right. Change that to make it a little bit closer. Go to the next step. Manual. And finally get to the last one. Oh, let me clean this little section here real quick. Perfecto. All right. And the last one, oh wait, let me look at here. Like I said, you definitely don't want to cross over these lines, especially depending on what you want to do. If you're going to virtually seat these cases, you want to make sure that nothing is crossed. And so I'm going to show you how to virtually seat in a little bit, and I'll definitely double check what I did. But I want to go on to the next steps, which is getting into the biojaw section here. Talk a little bit about that. All right, so once I finish, you can tell my voice, I'm really concentrating in these lines. All right. Now, I have a feeling I might have overlapped, but we'll see what happens. All right. So now, let us go to, my mouse is acting up a little bit here. All right, there we go. All right, we'll go to the next step. Edit insertion axis. On all the cases that I do when it comes to, bridges and stuff like that, this is the protocol I normally use, right? So if you take a look, you kind of look for some red when it comes to your arch there. So now they're all connected. So what I'll do on every single bridge, I'll just go to the bottom and click on every single tooth. And the reason why I do that is because once I click on it, it sets each axis for each prep tooth. So I'll just, no matter what, this is what I do on every single case. My fits are really, really nice, especially when you're working on big cases just like this. All right, so we'll go to the next one. And again, each one, by clicking each one, it sets each axis. All right. After we do that, we double arrow forward. Normally, you already have all your parameters preset, but if you're doing wax, the spacer just needs to be tight. But I mean, I normally glue these to the models anyways, so I'll just move some little, maybe something around, just so that this lights up. Apply to all. Once I highlight that, I click OK, and then I move on to the next step when it comes to cases like this. Well, now because I set all those dots exactly where I want them to be, my initial biojaw setup is usually almost dead on. So I'm actually almost done with the case, especially when I get to this phase right here. You definitely have all these different choices that you have. You have your biogeneric, you got your tooth database, if you're in the anteriors, you can use tooth shape or choose different databases. Of course, you have when you click on tooth shape, you have 3 options. When you click on database, it gives you a lot more options of different companies that have a library set. But normally what I do is I use biogeneric, and one of the reasons why I use biogeneric is because I do like using the biovariation tool. For now I want to show how to set this case up, and this is again what normally I do when I set up all my cases. Okay, so my goal here is each tooth is just a shell. So my goal is to try to get each tooth in a position where it at least is covering up your margins as best as possible. Of course, because when we set our biojaw and set our teeth into the positions that we want it to be, the shell will stay in its position, but then the actual proposal, the only thing that it actually does is look for that margin. But at least the setup that you actually set all your teeth are going to stay in the exact position, especially if you unclick the adaptive proposal. Okay, so when you're talking about adaptive proposal basically means that I'm gonna move these teeth into a position, but I want the software to take over my proposal. But if I want to override the software, then I uncheck the adaptive proposal, which means wherever I position my teeth is where it's going to propose. Again, the important part here is to make sure that all your shells are right over every single prep. Okay, so sometimes the margins, you don't want to go over the margins too much or under the margins. You want to kind of be able to position each tooth right over the margins. Okay, so again, just kind of working through the case, you fine tune each individual position of the crown or the tooth. Again, so if I wanted to group something, I can click on Control A and it actually groups all of them. And then once all of them get grouped, then you can move them around as a group. So I'm just setting up all these different teeth using a scale tool, just making sure that the teeth are actually contacting each other as best as they can. You see how I'm covering up those teeth right there? I'm sorry, those preps. Like I said, all you're trying to do is position each tooth in a position where it's sitting right over those preps. So, and I was debating whether or not to just kind of do a PowerPoint instead of doing a real case, but I think that it's important to kind of see a real case with the software to understand, the power of the software. So, if some of you have seen this before or have done it, well, again, I have to be here for an hour. All right. But again, what's cool about the software is, you think about a case this big, how long does it actually take you to wax it up? I can probably set this up if we're all watching, the clock right now. I can do a case this big, and this is a real case. To be honest with you, this particular case here, I actually got it from Vincent. I don't know, in Los Angeles. He has a really nice laboratory in Beverly Hills, and so I did a training at his place. And so what I really liked was he actually prepped this model, and once he prepped it, he said, show me how to use the software, and what would you do in a case like this? And so this happened a couple weeks ago, and like I said, when I heard about this webinar, I said, well, you know what? Let me use the same case. So I called him up yesterday and asked him, hey, do you think I can use your case for this webinar? Again, I could have used a case that I've done like many a time to kind of make things easier for me at least. But again, I want to show the power of what the inLab software can actually bring to the table. Again, being able to scan what the patient has existing right now, it's always pretty cool, because then I can just kind of align things. We want to definitely change things. We want to change things around a little bit here, according to what she had. But again, it's just kind of using it as a reference, not so much a copy, because I want to be able to get everything into position to have everything propose. So again, just kind of looking at my margins as best as I can, the positioning of those teeth. It's especially on the anteriors. Straighten things out a little bit. All right. I can bring out the catalogs, just kind of double checking a little bit here and there. Maybe bring this out slightly. All right. The last thing I do is now again the teeth need to be sort of touching. If the teeth are not exactly the same size at this point, I mean there's different options that I can do once it proposes. I can actually use my distance tool and try to measure everything and stuff like that. But as dental tech, I just want to get 90% there, and then just fine tune it with what I've been doing for years. Again, the inLab software is a tool. It's a tool that gets us to what we want a lot faster than hold on. Then to get to if we're going to hand wax this, again, I just want to be close. I want to get there. And then if I need to adjust the bite once I put this on the articulator, I can definitely adjust my bite. And this is how we handle most of our cases. Like I said, we'll just pull these out, making sure that they're covering the margins. All right. Maybe I should have sat in a chair that doesn't squeak as much. But all right. So again, if we were to at this point, let me just change these up just slightly. All right. Sometimes you overthink things because again, you don't want to have to sit here and hold on. Sorry about that. But when you click on the adapted tool, the adapted proposal, or unclick it, like I said, if I was to click the adapted tool, the adapted proposal, have it highlighted, then the software would actually help with the proposal. Since it's unclicked, wherever I place these teeth, or wherever I place these shells, it's exactly where they're going to sit in my proposal. And then the only thing that the software has to do is find a margin. So it needs to attach itself to the margin. All right, so let's let this propose. I know everybody's nervous, or at least a couple of you probably thought to themselves, this is actually not going to, propose. But you see how I'm not even moving my mouse? I'm letting the computer just do its thing. No clickies. Click, click, click. It's really bad. All right. Almost. We're going down the home stretch. And voila. All right. So now I can just kind of fine tune things a little bit. Position them, move them around. If I wanted to, I can also go back to the positioning tool. But because my proposal was really exactly where I want it to be, I'm not going to go backwards. So, but let's say if I have a couple teeth that I need to move around, I can always go back to the positioning tool. Once I go back to the positioning tool, I just move the teeth that I want to move, and then I can actually repropose. And the teeth that I actually moved were the ones that will repropose, and all the other ones will stay exactly where they are. So now we're just looking for, trying to fill in the areas that are too thin. Okay, because again, I just want to be 90% there. So that way, if I need to, carve a little bit or add some wax if I wanted to, I can definitely do that after it's milled. Just positioning a couple of these teeth. into occlusion. Again, if I wanted to, I can use my virtual articulator, but if I'm scanning something off of an articulator that's already been mounted, then, you know, I'm just going to set my teeth. And if I have to make minor adjustments, especially on the articulator, I will. But I can use my virtual articulator just to help out the situation. Like I said, at the end, even by using my virtual articulator, most likely if I put it onto the my articulator, I might still have to adjust. So we just need to produce. Again, we get a lot of these big cases, a lot of these wax ups, and so we just need to make sure that when they come in, they go out the door. So again, just kind of fine tuning little things here and there. All right. Straighten things out a little bit. Let me look at the. Sounds good. All right. So one of the things that we can actually do again is depending on your parameters, whatever your occlusion was set to, you can just right click and oops, I clicked on the wrong one. You can just right click and pull out your contact tool and click on occlusion by clicking on each one if you want to make your life a little bit easier. So I can just go through the mouth and click that, fill in the little thin areas. But okay, but either way, I think you guys understand what we're talking about. And like I said, I only have I think a half hour left. So what I do want to do is also show you other options that you have. But kind of moving forward, with the actual case, just set these teeth up according to where I want to position them for right now. So that way when I go back to the positioning tool, I don't have to work that much, but I can show you all the other functions that are available to us, right? So once you move forward, after you have the case exactly where you want it to be, then we have a couple options. One of the options that we have, as soon as it calculates, all right, one of the options that we have, of course, is to export to, but here's something I do in all my cases. I always turn it around and just kind of look at the inside of my cases, so that way I know that if I have any issues with maybe a burr not being able to, reach a certain area or something like that. So I always check underneath by pulling out the model and turning it around. But once I approve my design and everything looks good, then I just export it to CAM. That's one of my options. Let it export. I have this computer actually set up to another computer in the back of the laboratory. So it takes a little bit longer than norm because it has to transfer through the network. So it should be done in a couple seconds. Maybe a couple minutes. No, it should be done soon. All right, there you go. All right, so let's click OK. The other options you definitely have is if you want to export it as an STL to a third-party mill. Okay, you can click there and just export it. Okay, so let's cancel out of that, and then all right. So the other option that you definitely have is to virtually seed a case, right? So if you go back to your administration and you want to, let's say, create a model and print this out, whatever you just designed, right? You click on, let me get rid of some of these so that way they don't get in my way. So you click on this icon that says virtually seeding. You click on seat layer, then you click apply. So what it's going to do is it's actually going to take everything that you just designed, right, and make sure, and give you a virtually seeded model. Okay, but as I was saying earlier, if you do not check to make sure that your margins, okay, are clean, right? So at this point, I'm just going to double check all of them just to make sure nothing is overlapping. So if I see one that's overlapping, there's one right there. Okay, so if I see one that's overlapping, I need to fix that, because if not, it's going to give you an error. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll just go back, click on draw margin. Okay, this does not repropose your whole case. Okay, the only thing that you're doing is actually editing the margin. All right, so by me moving this little section right here, it will edit that margin. Okay, as long as you don't click on define insertion axis, you got to be patient. Okay, you need to be patient. See how now you just click on design. Once you click on design, go straight to edit restoration. So what it's going to do is it's actually just going to edit that little margin there. It's not going to repropose everything. But if you were to go step by step, let's say click next, and then all of a sudden, touch something, and the next thing you know, everything will just get reproposed. Okay, depending on what you're trying to do. So if you look at that little area right there, that's all it did was just separate those two a little bit better. Because again, if I was to virtually seat these, it would give you an error saying that it's not possible. So we'll just click on it again, seat layer, click apply. And I would definitely show you how to do a model right now, but I think I do not have time to do that. I don't know if maybe there will be another webinar that will show you how to do a virtually seated model. But this is what it would look like if you virtually seat it. Almost. All right, there you go. So now that I have a virtually seated model, if I want, I can do anything I want. Let's say if I wanted to create this model, I would just click on models, right? The upper. If I want to do the lower as well, then I can re-articulate this if I wanted to as well. But for now, let's just click the upper and then click OK and move forward. Okay. Since I didn't trim this model, of course, it's going to be a little bit bigger and stuff like that. But as you can see right there, you have the case that you just designed. Well, now it's virtually seated. So now we can create this model again. If you wanted to, you can export this. Once you go through the model module in the inLab software, you would go all the way to the end, and then you export as a STL. And then you can just, like I said, you can print it. You can send it to Infinident for them to send you a printed model. Okay. In our laboratory, we actually receive cases that are Connect cases, and we use the virtually seating for implant cases that we get sent. So let's say we'll create an abutment. Once we create the abutment, we virtually seat that abutment, and then with the model module, we then create the model, and then we print out the model. Let's say if we wanted to do a bridge on top of there, or we wanted to add porcelain, maybe make a coping and stuff like that. So the virtual seating is very powerful. All right, so now let's go back, and I want to show a couple different functions and a couple different ways to handle, especially like the anteriors of your crowns and stuff like that, right? For this case, we originally picked biogeneric, which will allow us to show how the how the biovariation tool works. So let me just go back here really quick just to triple check, because it seems like it was an hour ago since I looked at that. Okay, so biogeneric is picked. Again, you have different options. You can choose two shape, which will give you a void, or other ones. But let's just go back to the biogeneric just to make sure. I highlighted it again. I'm just going to repropose everything really quick. So then that way I can show you how that function works. Let's say once we're setting up our case and we want to add a little bit of anatomy to the actual case. Once we set up the teeth and everything proposes, because like I said, it will repropose if you decide to move something. Going back to what I did earlier where I just clicked on the margin, it will only redefine that margin. But because I went back and I clicked on a couple things, when it comes to picking biogeneric, well, now it's just going to repropose everything. So it's almost done. Again, don't click. You should never click. Just stay away from the clicking. Because we get sometimes impatient. I get impatient. And then that's when all of a sudden your computer all of a sudden decides to, and I haven't saved this, so let us move forward. Almost. All right, perfect. All right, so especially if you want to work on your anterior cases in the front, okay, what you're going to do is you're going to right click, you're going to hit on biovariation or biogeneric variation tool, okay. Let's say, let me remove these so you guys can see this. Let's say that all of a sudden I like, a tooth number. I can basically choose whatever tooth number. Oh, I forgot to group them all. My bad. Sorry. Let me undo that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Control A, which will now group them all. Once everything is grouped, now we can go back to the biovariation tool or biogeneric variation tool. Almost. All right. And move that to, let's say, I don't know, 73, 74. Let's try 73 right there. And once we let go, you can see how now the anatomy has changed for the crowns. You have 100 different biovariation numbers to choose from. So once you find one that you like for some cases or all your cases or whatever, you can actually do all your anterior crowns exactly the same way. So let it repropose, of course, because I changed the anatomy of the crown now. It needs to repropose. Almost. All right. So once everything proposes, now you can just alter. But it's very important that if you're going to use this tool, you make sure that you use this tool right off the bat. Don't start tweaking things or anything like that. So once you propose it, once you go from the biojaw to the actual proposal, you make sure that if you're going to use that tool, use it right away, because if not, anything that you did will be reset. The other options we have is to go through our database, right? So there's a simple one, which is basically your tooth shape, which is your ovoid, your square, or your tapered. Okay, you can choose those. I've used ovoid many a time, but then you can also choose different databases that are added to the software. So let's just say that we want to use this one right here. We click on it and move to the positioning tool. So what we'll do at this point is just edit restoration so that everything calculates. Okay, so that was the old proposal that we use. Again, every time you make any changes, it will definitely recalculate. So you want to make sure that right off the bat, you choose which direction you're going to go. So if you want to use the biovariation tool, you definitely click on biogeneric, and then you move forward so that you can use that tool. But if you want to use the other databases, then just start that way. Again, you just definitely don't want to spend all that time working on a case, and the next thing you know, the whole thing starts to recalculate and stuff. So choose your path wisely. All right, so it's almost done. So I was going to export this now, but I forgot I had already exported it. So now I want to show you what I do in the CAM software, especially where I place my sprues on the anteriors. So I already exported it earlier. So let me click on the CAM on the bottom here. All right, so now with the CAM software, I'm just going to add a new job. I'm going to use the MCX5. Click OK. I exported the case already, so I'm just going to highlight it. Choose a block. I already put in there a PMMA. I'm sorry, a PMMA block. I should have put a wax, but it doesn't matter. Double arrow forward. And now we're going to arrange this. You know, again, when you're doing the aesthetic wax up, especially if you're going to do the complete arch and you're not going to do them individually, when you're placing your sprues, you just got to make sure. And normally what I do is I do not put any sprues on any of my anteriors, because if I'm going to spend all that time you know, designing my case or even choosing databases or biogeneric variation or using the biovariation tool, then why would I put a sprue on the anterior? So once I place it into its position, and then we'll move forward, and then it's going to set up a bunch of the sprues at this stage here. But again, that is definitely overkill. So what I normally do is I remove all the anteriors by just deleting them. Okay, on the facial, just get rid of those. I don't really need those. And then normally the golden rule, especially for me, is just to use every other crown and put a sprue on the lingual or on the buccal. So that's exactly what I do on every single one, especially when they're full arches and stuff like that. So I even removed this one. I mean, that's kind of useless. I can also get rid of one of those back molars if I wanted to too. So at this point, then we just move forward. You have, you know, three options. You have your rough mill, your fine mill, and your extra fine. So at this point, you're going to choose the one that's going to fit you. Let's say if you're, you know, actually going to work on your case and you want to add your own flavor to it, then I mean, why would you spend all that time milling in extra fine if you're going to change things up a little bit, right? So the best thing to do is just choose which way you want to go. Normally on these, I mill them out in extra fine all the time. So basically that's the process when it comes to designing. When it comes to designing cases, and you know, once you export it into the CAM software, you know, again, our laboratory does a lot of different cases when it comes to you know, wax ups, and normally we can handle, you know, big cases like this. As you notice, I designed this case about in 20 minutes, but I did go back and forth a couple times to show you the different choices that you have. But again, you know, I can spend, after I'm done with this, you know, do another case, let's say an anterior 6 unit, and to be honest with you, it takes me about 15 minutes just to set them all up and move forward. So, you know, again, I was thinking about this webinar, and I was kind of thinking, you know, whether or not to do a PowerPoint and just kind of like do a step by step. But I wanted to show it because I do get a lot of phone calls, you know, that they say, well, you know, big cases, you can't handle it, or the software, you know, bogs down and stuff like that. You know, sometimes you definitely want to save. You want to click, you know, Control S. Of course, you guys, you know, when it comes to this particular case, I had already done it once before, so I kind of went through the same process. But you definitely always want to click, you know, save, just in case. I mean, you know, it is what it is. I've gone into laboratories where you know, they're working on 4 cases, and then they never close them down, and the next thing you know, they pull out a full arch, and then they wonder why their system is going really slow and stuff like that. I mean, this computer I have here that I'm using here it has a 670 graphics card, which is, you know, what I purchased from Simona about I think it was about a year and a half ago, and I haven't really touched it or done anything to this particular computer. But again, that's basically the process. So what I want to do at this point is show you a couple pictures of a couple cases that we've done. You know, like I said, you have the option of doing it as a bridge altogether. You know, again, that is the fastest, easiest way. But sometimes, you know, if you want to spend some time and really not have to work too much, I do them individually. So Like here's a case that we did. Again, we milled it out with white wax. We like the harvest wax again. For us, it works for us really good. So you can mill them out individually, but sometimes when you do them individually, then you set a sprue and it's on your facial area. Again, what we like about this particular wax is that I can actually take a stone and just use a handpiece and remove those sprues instead of using your carvers. Like I said, it all depends on which direction you want to go. Sometimes this works for us because we can actually set up a case depending on how we want to do it. Even when we do veneers, sometimes if we're just going to design veneers, sometimes it is easier just to do them single units. But again, it all depends on your abilities when it comes to designing. But they fit really nice. I mean, you don't really have to touch the contacts, especially when you do it this way. But the only issue is when you got a bunch of these cases here, and you're going to be working on them, and they all become single units. It becomes a jigsaw puzzle. So again, it's just about choosing which direction you're going to go and how you're going to handle each individual case. So in cases like this is a full arch that we decided to just mill it out in one whole piece. And what we normally do is once we put it on there, we'll add a little bit of shine to it. You can choose that, or it all depends. If you're going to make a putty, but if this is a presentation, then you can add some gloss to it. Now, cases like this, like I said, Sarah Connects. We get cases Sarah Connect all the time, and then they just want us to do wax ups and then send it back. So if we had virtual preps, that would be awesome. Just saying, just throwing it out there. All right, cases like that. But one of the coolest things that we've noticed right now that we're doing is if a doctor says to us, just send me the case that you just did and print out a model, virtually seed it. Once we virtually seed it, we ship it off to the doctor. Well, folks, that's all she wrote. I want to thank you for tuning in and watching this webinar. Like I said, for those of you that stayed all the way through it, thank you. If you've never tried a webinar or never tried to do one of these things, like I said, it's one of the hardest things to do in my eyes. I can sit in front of 100 people or sit in a class and teach a bunch of people, but when I'm sitting here looking at a computer and just talking, sometimes I get in my own head. I don't know how Jay does it. Jay's pretty good at doing this kind of stuff. So thank you again. So if you have any questions, I'm definitely here to answer them. So thank you.